Probably the biggest and most welcome surprise from the last couple anime seasons. I'm sure it definitely had its own passionate fanbase before the anime came out, but before the first episode was released, which was already more than half a year ago now, you most likely wouldn't have seen anyone talking about it. You'd probably never even heard about it before. I know that I had never heard about that name before, and now 6 months later, everyone has watched and is talking about this series that offers something different but is just as compelling as the battle shonen series that surround it. It's not loud and bombastic with its conflicts and powers, and there aren't really any complex rules or systems to this world that need learning, but rather a very well reserved, thought-provoking adventure that doesn't lose its core essence, which is that of a journey of self-discovery called Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Starting with the premise, which if you haven't seen the anime or read the manga, you should get a pretty good idea of what the vibe of this story is all about from this brief explanation. We follow a group, an unlikely group that came together. Frieren, the elven mage, Eisen, the dwarven warrior, Heiter, the drunken priest, and Himmel, the hero. The big bad, the demon king, they have already defeated. They celebrated into the night, held parades to honor this great victory. But wait, that's all done, that's finished, that's all in the past. And when it was done, Frieren said, well, I'll be seeing ya, but probably not. The main quest, the main story may have already happened, in which Frieren played a vital role, but once it was all said and done, in her eyes the journey to defeating the Demon King was just as much of a side quest as all the rest of it. Cause when you live for well over 1,000 years, one measly adventure is a mere blink in the life of an elf. So before we get to the main plot of the story, there's still some bits and bobs to get through. Firstly, Frieren was not the protagonist of that story. While she was definitely indispensable for the effort, out of all the four members, she took the furthest backseat in terms of how emotionally involved she was with the whole ordeal. This quest that took 10 years was comfortably far and away the most eventful and impactful event of the lives of each of the other members of the hero's party. Something that would prove their worth, define who they are, and solidify their legacy. For Frieren, it was just a chance to get out of the house for a change, and after it was all said and done, she'll go back to her old routine and likely forget the others and the time she shared with them. And after many years have passed, decades in fact, so a really long time, or at least from our perspective that is, the party reunites with Himmel, the hero having now sadly passed, with this very moment serving as the catalyst to Frieren's motivations and actions for the rest of the series. It's here where she comes to the realization that while she spent all this time keeping to herself, the others still kept in touch rather than going their separate ways just as she did. And it's a major moment of clarity when the reality hits her. These people that she shaped the world alongside, she does not know the slightest thing about them, nor did she deeply think about them at all after it was all said and done. And now that another mere blink has passed, their time is coming to an end, and she now understands the true value of that time she let slip from her mind. Everyone tries to live life to the fullest to make the most of the time we have, and more importantly alongside the ones we care about, and regardless of how hard you may find it to vocalize that love and care, you have those feelings inside you. But at the same time, no matter what age you are, there's also another lingering feeling, a fear that you may not be doing enough, you're wasting time, or are we taking it for granted? Maybe you're currently thinking about the biggest moments in your life, where I would hazard a guess and say that you weren't on your own. Even if it was a memory focused on you like your birthday, what made that moment was the presence of your friends and family, not you sitting at your bed or at your TV. Or maybe rather than looking back, your mind is focused on the now and the future, like how different things are now. So-and-so is already X years old, I'll be this old by the time that happens. The constant passage of time seems all the more daunting when you realize how much of your time has blended together, only distinguishable thanks to individual memories and the ones around you. And that's what's happening with Frieren. Having lived a life so long, so vast, and so filled with what? What is it that filled all of her years of life? And at the time of Himmel's passing, you could say that since she distanced herself from the rest of the party, she had no one around to distinguish the different moments. Thus, it all blended with the previous years. This is the curse of such a long life, the curse of immortality, becoming solitary, numb to the goings on around you. But one good thing that it brings is that it gives her the opportunity to give it one more go. And that finally brings us back to the main plot of the story, with Frieren gaining new companions as she makes her way to being able to talk to Himmel again, all the while taking her time to know, care, understand herself and those she's journeying with. So now that's set, the premise that the story is trying to put down into motion, a very contemplative one that should hit close to home for just about anyone watching or reading. And this is just the setup. Now the rest of it has to follow through with a narrative that satisfyingly represents Frieren's growth, and also now the passage of time as we follow Frieren for each step rather than just seeing the effects after the fact like with the hero's quest. Well, I say setup and following through, but that's doing a disservice to the first part of the story. The reunion of the hero's party is just as important a character scene for Frieren as any of them. I guess what I mean to say is that her character stays compelling through the rest of the first season. Revisiting her age, she is experienced, very experienced. She's older than the towns and cultures around her, so it makes a ton of sense that her disposition is that of someone just going through the motions, because she's been there, done that, and then some. And this is something I didn't pick up myself, but I was guided to, and that is the fact that she has full trust in her party, in Stark and Fern, even when they are unsure of themselves, when the audience is unsure of them. But the biggest thing that makes her stand out is that I would say is one of her weirder characteristics, and that's she's childish, which sounds odd considering how old she is. She's very awkward, immature, maybe you could say. All of her time to herself has made her socially unpolished and mentally as well. And now that she's taken it upon herself to better understand the people around her, those characteristics make her stand out even more. Something like her laziness, sleeping in, is something we can relate to. Who doesn't like a couple extra hours of sleep? But it takes on a whole new meaning when you look at it from the perspective that, from her perspective, she has so many years of life left, and she takes that as meaning she has so much more spare time to waste. Her basic cleanliness, like tidying up, brushing her hair, these chores fall to the wayside, since basic appearances like that don't mean much in the face of 1000 plus years worth of it. And that brings us full circle with the childish thing, because Fern is left to clean up after her, to mother her. And you can see these little details of her character in every scene where her childish side and more experienced side kind of cross over. Like when she slides down the roof tiles, this is kid behavior 101, and you know that she's loving it, but at the same time, this could be her own way of enjoying herself. Outside of collecting grimoires, that is, for all the time she's been alive, she's probably developed a soft spot for the little things in life. The character of Frieren offers so much in terms of relatability, but also this kind of distance, and even if it is ever so slowly, you can really see that distance shrinking and shrinking with each episode. But the other pillar of this show is the flashbacks. The way they are handled specifically in regards to their placements throughout the story is unreal. I mean, what it does for Frieren, it shows a parallel between what she's doing in the present day and what she had done in the past, but more importantly, it's all the time that Frieren spent with the party coming back to her. She started this show with a huge pile of regret over not knowing or remembering enough about himmel, heiter and eisen, but as she holds on to each moment today, she starts viewing a moment from her past in a different light. Thus it comes back to her. It's her remembering the past as she grows, and I think that's amazing. And although I don't want to push eisen and heiter to the side, because I do love them, Himmel is the star of the show when it comes to these flashbacks. He was the main character of the hero's quest. It's named after him, but in a sense, he is still that big of a figure. In present day, the timeline is marked from the time that has passed since Himmel was laid to rest. He was and is that guy. His personal mark is still left on the world and also on Frieren. It's he who is usually the main focus of the party's flashbacks, and it's his words that help Frieren's current self. But that also means that it was him more so than anyone who was ironically really appealing to Frieren's humanity. And I said this on countless occasions while watching it, Himmel definitely had feelings for her. That group as a whole, we see that they or the guys at least were already together when they met Frieren, and from what we see of them together, I would describe their dynamic as this. The three guys were close friends, if not brothers, and they were in a group project maybe, and Frieren joined to add up the numbers, and while Eisen and Heiter were off goofing around or doing their own thing, Himmel was slowly making moves on the girl he had a crush on. The really sad thing though is that during their time, Frieren was in no position to reciprocate his feelings, and she only came to understand it once it was too late. But it still has payoff, which is how she tries to emulate his character now. She's now trying to live up to the mighty figure that was Himmel the hero, but who was also Himmel, one of her closest friends, and that too is another thing. I mentioned Frieren's affinity of the little things, but those were things that she kept to herself, that affected herself, whereas Himmel, a big part of his legacy that we see is the little things that he did, but in the way of helping others, as we see with Wirbel's story. And maybe that's something she's keeping to herself. She is actively trying to better herself, following in Himmel's footsteps, so that when she finally reaches him and talks to him again, maybe then she can finally receive his feelings. Frieren has a new party, new companions, but more accurately new friends that are reminding her of the value of her old ones, and we get to see firsthand how she's changed, how she's still trying to change. It's a redemption arc, but in a different manner. It's character guilt, but in a different manner. And those differences make all the difference of why Frieren Beyond Journey's End is so genuinely special.